Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Arsenal but bring you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Christian Benteke and James McArthur after the game. So let's begin. Crystal Palace recorded a remarkable victory after a tough battle on Sunday as they stormed what was swiftly becoming an impenetrable North London fortress to take 3 points from Arsenal with 3 emphatic goals. The Eagles gripped their prize firmly in their grasp after a nerve-wracking spell on the back foot, valiantly battling the Gunners' pressure, but their clinical finishing going forward and on the break earned them 3 points set to linger long in fans' memories, far beyond their impact this season. That win was the first at the Emirates for an away side in the league since August 2018, making Palace's charge in Holloway one of their finest results this season. As perhaps expected given the recent history between the two clubs, Roy Hodgson's were the first side to be forced into defensive action when Mesut Ozil found himself striking an effort at goal from the edge of the box. However, his opening shot was as tame as the first minute would typically expect, and Gaeta was able to hold it with ease. Another half chance fell the host's way as Panos worked his way into the Eagles' box before angling a shot and forcing the ball into the Gunners' danger zone. However, his deflected pass looped down to the wrong man amongst a crowd of talented finishers, and Mohamed El-Neni sent an attempt ballooning over the bar. At the other end of the pitch, similarly unlikely threats were on hand to send the Emirates into a unified intake of breath as Scott Dan powdered a header at goal from a well-placed corner, only for Martin Kelly to deflect the effort high under pressure from the red and white defence. It wasn't to impact the match moments later when Palace, certainly well involved in the opening exchanges, took the lead. On his 200th Premier League appearance, Christian Benteke was gifted a chance off the deft boot of Luka Milivojevic, whose cross from distance glided over the Arsenal defence and onto the head of the Belgian frontman, who buried the ball, the exact marksman needed in a perfect situation. Offered a chance to make the lead a short-lived one, Alexandre Lacazette was left cursing his balance in the box as he attempted a smart turn on the spot to strike home from close range. However, his feet were left behind his head and the ball scuffled off his leg and out, eventually to safety. Another threat was posed to the visitors a few moments later when, breaking from a Palace attack, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was denied smartly by Milivojevic, who stole the ball from his head before Mustafi knocked over from the resulting corner. The Eagles had received a multi-pronged warning that they were determined to heed, through Arsenal's progressing offence kept them penned in for large spells. Any time Palace carried possession further up the pitch, they drove further for their fans, outnumbered by the over 50,000 voices who willed them forward from their standpoint behind in spite of the tense, gritty performance they stood watching. The steady, reliable support from the Emirates South London contingent was periodically interrupted by spells of excitement from the larger home crowd, however, who kept from growing idle by the almost repeated charges of the Gunners' attacking infantry, setting up camp in and around the Eagles' box. It was on the break that Palace, perhaps expectedly, looked the most dangerous, and Benteke was denied his second by the raised flag of the linesman after Wilfried Zaha threaded through acutely but was a little too late. The net bulged in vain. In the face of the Gunners' ascendancy though, Palace were the side who finished the opening half the brightest, and Chucky Kiata was unlucky not to net 3 times in half a minute, as a spectacular double save by Bernd Leno denied the Senegalese midfielder from close range. With the first half winding to a dramatic close, the Eagles weren't done, and with a minute's extra time in the final throws, Benteke looked hungry for his brace, but struck too high from the centre of the box, allowing John Moss's whistle to sound Arsenal's protection from further damage. Palace's ability to hold off the home side's offensive onslaught didn't last long into the second half though, and the damage was inflicted confidently by Ozil, who had been played through by Lacazette with an inch-perfect ball the German midfielder had to strike home. Though with a less fatal outcome, Sead Kolasinac was the next to unnerve the visitors as he caught a volley 20 yards out that Gaeta did well to leap and hold on to. Palace's talismanic Zaha refused to allow the North Londoners another moment's dominance however, and knocked through by a remarkable delicate header from Benteke, the winger skipped one-on-one with Leno and rifled home with precision, wheeling off to launch into celebrations with the fans caught in the blazing sun nearby. 2 almost became 3 just minutes later when a eventual goal-scoring trio of Zaha, Benteke and James McArthur formed a spearhead attack to bear down on Arsenal's goal. However, its Scottish centre was only able to shoot into the arms of Leno from the edge of the Germans' box. The Scotsman didn't need another chance to emphatically turn 2 into 3 however, when he stood close to goal and glanced home a towering down header, sending the visiting South London faithful into raptures. North London silent in the spring weather by its guests' vocal celebration. The home crowd were given their own time to cheer though, and Aubameyang teed up a nail-biting final 10 minutes as he buried the ball into Palace's net, reducing the deficit to 1 as he did. The Eagles refused to simply soak up the home side's pressure and await full time in the final exchanges, when Zaha drove into the box to catalyse the tense attack that ended with a McArthur being held at full strength by Leno. The game's most astonishing save came shortly after from the Spanish shot stopper though, as Gaeta flew like a cat across his goal to instinctively tip the ball from his line and preserve Crystal Palace's once unimaginable lead. Squandering the game's last chance, substitute Alex Iwobi then struck too softly into the Spaniard's arms before the Emirates erupted in an isolated corner at the final whistle. 3 points and 3 goals, the prize after a successful Palace storming of one of the Premier League's most sturdy fortresses. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook as Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like myself who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts on both Twitter and Facebook, then of course I'd highly recommend you do follow both of our accounts at Crystal Palace. Now alongside the latest Palace news, so whether that be about ongoings at the club, whether it be about the academy, the ladies team, obviously alongside sort of that general news stuff, we obviously do regularly update both accounts with the latest transfer news. So if you are someone who, you know, especially so coming towards the end of the season, the summer transfer window is obviously coming up, and of course there's going to be many ingoings and outgoings we can obviously predict. So of course if you are someone who wants to get up to date with all the latest transfer news, you know, players coming in, players coming out, sort of the prices that have been linked with players, then of course do head over to our accounts there, because I would say that we're quite good at actually sourcing these news articles as soon as they go out there and obviously get it to you guys as well. Now alongside that we also post interviews, so whether that be with players, with management, with anyone really about the club, basically any interviews which have something to do about Palace, we also post them as well. So if you do want a place to sort of get all of this general news as well as sort of your transfer news and your interviews also added on top, then of course follow both our Twitter and Facebook account. And obviously alongside that we also occasionally post our own opinion on there. So obviously I give you my opinion in the podcast, but obviously there's a few guys over there who run the account obviously before the game, sort of after press conferences and stuff, giving their sort of preview to the game, and of course after the game giving that instant match reaction is also something we do. So if you do want an account to follow for the news but also for the opinion, of course follow our accounts at Crystal Palace. Now another great place for you guys to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments, so if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10, and that is of course with 10 being the best. Now mainly for me, the reason I want you to do that is that rather than me just having my opinion, you know, me rating how I thought the players performed, I want you guys to also comment it below so I can read through the comment section, see how sort of our opinions of the players sort of compared, and essentially see if there was any differences, and if there was any differences, of course they're open for discussion. So if you are someone who wants to get involved or wants to share your opinion, if it may be different to mine, of course feel free to do that, and of course the best way of doing that is just listing your player ratings. But even alongside that, if you want to post your own opinion of the game, whether you're an Arsenal fan, whether you're a Palace fan, also feel free to comment that below as well, because of course Palace perspective, last time we won there was God knows when, so it was nice for us to finally win a game at the Emirates, and of course away from home against Arsenal, which we haven't done since sort of the 90s. So it was nice in our perspective to get that win, to score 3 goals once again away from home. But obviously in an Arsenal's perspective, you know, their defence was quite lackadaisical, and especially for the second goal it was terrible, you know, Mustafi in particular. So of course there's going to be differing opinions of the game. So of course alongside your player ratings, feel free just sort of your general views of the game. And like I said already, it's so that I can read the comment section, see what you guys thought about the game, but also any other fans, whether they be Arsenal or Palace fans, when they come to the podcast, rather than just listen to me, they can read the comment section, and obviously they can also have a debate there as well. And I suppose I might as well put it out there, if there is anything you might disagree with, which I'm going to say, you know, talking about players, or maybe a question you want to ask me, you know, something I may have missed, also feel free to comment that below as well, because I do like to have discussions in that respect. Now if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned or join our Facebook group, then do check all links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player rating, starting and go with Vicente Gaeta, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now something that's been sort of a reoccurring theme with Gaeta's performances recently is the fact that the amount of saves he made in the game, or the saves he's made in the game, have been very crucial to us getting wins. And of course, you know, even against Tottenham, where we still lost the game, it was quite crucial to us not losing the game by a bigger margin. So actually, coming into this game here, you know, Gaeta's on a great run of form. And like I've said there, you're looking at the Huddersfield game, you're looking at the Tottenham game, and you're even looking at the Man City game. You know, it could have been these games which we lost could have been by a bigger scoreline, and of course the ones we won, you know, Newcastle as well. These are games where he kept us in it, and this was a game once again where yes, we still conceded 2 goals, but he kept us in the game. Certainly at 0-0. 1-0, and of course at the end of the game when it was 3-2. So these key moments in the game where Gaeta made himself basically made himself counted in the team, made these saves to yet again keep us in the team, was really nice to see. Now there was one save in particular I want to talk about, and this was the one really late into the game, and I know I'm brushing over quite a lot of the game, but the majority of his good saves were right at the end. So this one was from Andre Lacazette. Literally late on in the game, Arsenal have got a chance inside the box, and of course Gaeta, almost like a cat essentially, as people described it, he was obviously on his left hand side, dived to his right and parried the ball away. So that save not only showed good reactions, but the good movement as well to actually get across his goal line. So things like this is just really showing the class that Gaeta, you know, has. And you know, you look at the first goal in particular, you know, yes, people are criticising him, and yes, he was at his near post, maybe he should have done better. But when you consider the quality of that ball by Mesut Ozil, or the quality of the finish in terms of chipping it over him, and the fact that it is still quite a difficult angle, even though it's his near post, you know, you can understand him sometimes getting caught out for that. So you've got two sides here where people are looking at his performance, they're going, some great saves towards the end of the game, like the one from Lacazette, but then some people are blaming him for the goal, well, especially for the first goal. I personally don't put any blame on him for that, because the rest of the game sort of made up for that. But I suppose if he didn't make that little mistake, or at least rather than doing sort of what Spanish keepers do in terms of getting down to the ground and trying to save like that, if he just made himself big and actually tried to parry it, then maybe it would have been something different there. But I suppose that's sort of the goal we conceded, and the fact that maybe he could have done better is why I've given him a 7 as opposed to an 8. And obviously when you're looking around Arsenal trying to get their second goal, there was also, you know, a lot of chaos inside the box. You know, we were trying to defend against it. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang had another chance, and Gaeta made a save. So two sort of moments in the game where we could have, you know, one of them, you know, could have gone on to Arsenal to make it bring it back to 2-2, and of course the other one being to make it 3-3 at the end of the game. So two saves here from Lacazette, from Aubameyang, which were really good and really crucial to us staying in the game. But the thing that really did impress me, and this is obviously links in with the saves, but the part of the thing that makes the saves most impressive is the agility he showed in terms of getting down low, getting up high, you know, coming forward to claim crosses, and also the reflexes as well, and the time it took him to do the reflexes, because he was so quick in terms of getting down low, getting in the right position, claiming crosses. So obviously the saves he made in the game were quite good, and, you know, showing good reactions. But the fact that he combined that with his agility and his movement as well just sort of took it to another level. And like I've said, it was a game yet again in the last sort of few weeks or so where his saves have been really crucial to us getting something from the game. Now obviously towards the end of the game, obviously with Palace 3-1 up, and of course subsequently 3-2 up, obviously we had to try and waste a bit of time, sort of run the clock down, and certainly Gaeta did do that. So some of the catches he may have held on to the ball a little bit longer, not obviously too long that the referee would take notice, but, you know, long enough. And little things like this, combining his saves with the fact that he was just having good time management, you know, playing the clock down, they were really good to see as well. And, you know, the fact that John Moss was quite happy just to let it go on because he weren't doing too long was of course great to see as well. And, you know, to be honest, you can't really blame him, because, you know, you're 3-1 up or 3-2 up in the game as it was, you know, right at the end, and of course you don't want to go on to lose the game. So it was perfectly fine for him just to be pretty calm, play the ball out quite calmly at the back. And, you know, when you consider, you know, yes, the Arsenal players may have been a little bit annoyed, but we restricted them so well that Gaeta was just able to do it quite calmly. But overall, very impressive performance once again from Gaeta. Obviously, I've given him the 7 there. Obviously, a save right at the end of the game from Lacazette, and one from Iwobi as well, which were two fantastic saves to keep us in the game at 3-2. And of course, even though some people may debate maybe he should have done better with Mesut Ozil's finish, I personally would put my hands up and go, actually, yes, it's at his near post, but, you know, it was a good finish from Ozil. And of course, you know, throughout the majority of the game anyway, you know, making saves from people like Aubameyang, showing good agility, good reflexes, good reactions, as well as, you know, just being that dominance in the air in terms of, you know, claiming crosses and things like that. So I do think overall, on the whole, a very good performance. And, you know, like I said a minute ago, you know, in terms of playing the clock down and just little things like that, little contributions which helped us to go through and see out the game, were certainly things that did impress me. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is the right back Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now obviously, like I say week in week out, and I'm going to say it again here, I do find myself repeating myself quite a lot about Wan-Bissaka, and that's purely based on the fact that his performances are so consistently at a high level. So I've given him an 8 here for the game against Arsenal, and it was just because it was a classic Wan-Bissaka performance. You know, both defensively and offensively he was sound. And yet again, against quality opposition, you've got people like Ozil, people like Aubameyang, people like Lacazette. This is real quality that Arsenal have got in attack. And the fact that, even when Iwobi came on, the fact that Wan-Bissaka dealt with these sort of guys so well just goes to show the quality he's got. And, you know, you've just got to look at the list of wingers he's actually done really well against this season, just to show the quality he's got here. Now, obviously, in terms of Wan-Bissaka's job here, you know, you look at the average positions of the team, and actually Joe Ward on the opposite flank was playing quite high up, whereas Wan-Bissaka was playing quite deep. So obviously our tactic was, of course, to let Wan-Bissaka stay deep and just sort of clean up and mop up all of the defensive work and allow Joe Ward to be that guy going forward. Now that's not to say that Wan-Bissaka didn't go far forward, because of course he did on a number of occasions, but like I said, if you look at the average positions, Wan-Bissaka was actually playing quite deep, and I think that sort of worked in our favour, because we had Scott Dan, Martin Kelly and Wan-Bissaka playing deep for the majority of the game, or on the average, and that sort of gave us that solid base that we, at any time, we always had sort of 3 players at the back. And I suppose Joe Ward, when he was playing quite deep, you can also include him in that as well. But in terms of holding his own down that right hand side, or down Arsenal's left hand side, like Wan-Bissaka does all the time, done exactly that, restricted Arsenal, frustrated them, and just does what he normally does in terms of, you know, making his tackles, making his blocks. And, you know, yes, sort of Kolasinac, obviously the left back for Arsenal, a little scare there in terms of when he managed to find Mesut Ozil in the first minute of the game. So one moment there where maybe Wan-Bissaka early on in the game wasn't quite switched on. But other than that sort of early scare where obviously Kolasinac found Ozil, you know, the fact that he just, after that mistake, just picked himself up, settled into the rhythm of the game, and just continued like he has done this season. So it was nice to see him once again. You know, yes, that could have resulted in a goal in the first sort of few minutes of the game, and that could have completely changed the complexion of it. But nevertheless, the fact that he picked himself up and just continued and played to this high standard that he has done so many times this season was, of course, great to see. Now, of course, one of the things really why Arsenal were quite frustrated in the game is, yes, they had dominance, they had the possession at times, but we just sort of broke their rhythm, and that was really down to Wan-Bissaka, because whenever Arsenal were trying to sort of get down that side of the pitch, trying to break forward, trying to sort of get in behind us, Wan-Bissaka was there just to break the rhythm, whether that be with a tackle, whether that be with a challenge, whether that be just blocking the ball going into the box. So the fact that his overall defensive play was good was obviously really good to see, as it always is. But the fact that he done so well in terms of not just making the challenge, but actually just stopping Arsenal in their tracks, stopping their rhythm, and frustrating them in the fact that they can't play the way they want to play, was of course really impressive, and goes real lengths to show how good Wan-Bissaka was here. But once again, I think he fully deserves the 8. You know, classic Wan-Bissaka performance. You know, loads of slide tackles, done really well defensively, marshalled his side really well, and restricted the wingers on that side. And whilst we didn't see too much of him offensively, because of course, looking at the average position, he obviously had to go back and defend, but the fact that he had that ability a few times going forward, you know, to have the link up play with people like Zaha, people like Benteke, he's also got that ability just to drive forward as well. You know, you've got to look at our first goal, and I believe it was, obviously correct me if I'm wrong, Wan-Bissaka broke, got the ball to Benteke, Benteke gets taken down, Luka delivers the free kick in, and Benteke scores. So once again, a moment there where Wan-Bissaka's driving forward, and obviously played a big part in us getting that first goal. So once again, Wan-Bissaka here, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the first of our 2 centre-backs, and that is Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. So of course, Martin Kelly here, I've given him a 6, and I do think it was a very competent performance from him. I just think when you compare him to other players in the side, I just think that he just done his shift, but there wasn't really anything outstanding in his game. So I do think he does deserve the 6 overall. Now obviously, in terms of restricting Arsenal's attacks and trying to frustrate them, I think he done a relatively good job of that, you know, making a number of crucial blocks in the area, getting down low, you know, just tackling the Arsenal players. So the fact that he was doing all of the basics right, but of course upping his level because of the quality of the opposition, was of course good to see. And obviously when you see Arsenal fans complaining about the loss, you know, you've got to look at their front line or their attacking players and go, their players, that's their first team squad essentially, you know, whereas Palace on the other hand, we're playing our third and fourth choice centre backs, and we're playing a left back. We're playing a right back at left back, so you've got to look at it and go, actually, considering it was a very makeshift defence, you know, three players in that back four haven't really played much together this season. So the fact that they've done well as a partnership was, of course, great to see. But actually, individually, even though I've given Martin Kelly a 6, I do think he obviously gave his contribution to the side. Now, there was one moment in particular which, you know, is one of the reasons I've downgraded him, and that's just that he was a caught up, sort of nice build-up play from Arsenal. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, obviously that's the goal he scored, and nice build-up play involving that. But actually, it was Martin Kelly who was obviously caught out a little bit. You know, couldn't quite keep up with the pace of Aubameyang, and of course that's the that was the second goal that Arsenal scored. So obviously it was a good strike, you know. From Aubameyang in terms of, you know, getting the ball in the edge of the area, shooting, past Gaeta, through the defence. Nothing really we could have done, or Gaeta could have done about it, but maybe Martin Kelly in the build-up of that, you know, not getting caught out, being just a little bit aware, like he had been in the rest of the game, probably would have upped his performance overall. But of course, if you're looking back at that first goal, obviously tried to find Lacazette. Obviously Lacazette plays the ball into Aubameyang, and of course he plays the ball into the area, and of course essentially played the ball off Martin Kelly, and obviously he found the back of the net. So just that one move in particular was something which was a little bit disappointing. But aside from that, that was really the only clear mistake he made in terms of getting caught out for that. And I do think overall he done a really decent job, and I think he does deserve the 6 I've given him, because whilst I've criticised him for that second goal, actually the first goal we conceded wasn't really his fault. And like I said already, the fact that he was very competent, was making challenges, doing what he has to do defensively, but of course upping it for the quality of the opposition, was of course good to see. So Martin Kelly here, I do think the 6 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to his centre-back partner, and that is Scott Dann, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now I suppose I could repeat much the same, you know, with Dan's performance and with Kelly's performance, in the fact that, once again, yes, I've criticised him a little bit this season, saying, you know, his injuries have seemed to have taken his toll, but this was a game where once again he stepped up, made himself count, brought up his level, and was there to match the opposition. And certainly it was like the Scott Dann of old, because not only was he good defensively and he was able to restrict and frustrate the opposition, but actually he brought us that threat from set pieces, as we saw with the third goal Palace scored, with of course him heading the ball down into McArthur for McArthur to score. So obviously I've given him a 7, mainly because of the fact that his defensive work and his solidity in that back four was obviously unprecedented in terms of the quality of the opposition, but also just that threat and how more effective we look from set pieces when he is playing just goes lengths to show that that's something we've really been missing from our game. Now the main thing defensively that I was impressed with is the fact that the amount of balls that he was winning in the air. So a number of times Arsenal trying to play the ball into the box, because we were sort of frustrating them down the middle because we were playing so narrow. And actually I think he was unbeatable in the air, because whenever something came into the box, he was one of the first men there to clear it. So that alone defensively, if you manage to restrict all of the aerial threat coming into the box, you've taken away sort of half of the opposition's chances. So that was of course nice to see. And there were numerous other times as well, you know, battles for high balls, battles sort of one-on-one situations where he's actually done really well. So the fact that he's dominating the air as well as sort of dominating the play sort of in front of the defence as well, especially with, you know, catching the high balls and playing the balls out from the back, that was of course great to see as well. And, you know, whereas Martin Kelly got caught out for the second goal Arsenal scored, I do think on the whole part, I can't really think of a moment where Scott Dann was out of position, because I think for the majority of the game he positioned himself well, got into good positions, both offensively and defensively, and of course that was great to see. Now of course, like I've briefly mentioned already, he obviously got the assist for James McArthur's goal. Obviously Luca already got the, well, it's not really, it is an assist, the fact that he scored the free kick, but of course once again from another set piece with the corner, whips in the corner, Scott Dann rises the highest, heads the ball down straight into McArthur's sight, and of course McArthur scores the goal to make it 3-1 to Palace. So you're looking at that going, actually Scott Dann not only was doing great defensively in the game, but when Luca, obviously it was a good delivery from Luca to find him directly, but the ball came in, and of course Scott Dann, with that aerial presence, with that threat he's got, headed it down, nice accuracy of course from McArthur to score. And you know, when you consider at that point Arsenal had scored early in that half, and yes, we've got it back to 2-1, but of course that's a fine margin, you know, 1-goal lead. And of course it was nice to see him make a contribution to essentially prevent Arsenal from getting back into the game, or sort of being in a chance of getting a point, because at that point if you stop them scoring or you make it 3-1, which of course we did because of his contribution. That sort of not necessarily kills the game, because Arsenal still went on to score to make it 3-2, but it obviously gives us that 2-goal cushion, which of course is better than the 1 goal we would have had, 1 goal cushion if of course Scott Dan hadn't have headed down that corner overall. But like I've said already, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. And like I said with the whole back 4, obviously I'm going to talk about Joe Ward in a minute, but you're looking at Joe Ward, who's a right back playing at left back. You're looking at Scott Dan and Martin Kelly, who are 4th and 3rd choice centre backs respectively. So you're looking at that going, that's a very makeshift defence. But the fact that they've done so well against the quality opposition, and certainly the attack in particular of Arsenal, how good they are, the fact that they dealt with them relatively well besides the goals we conceded, and especially, you know, how they brought their aside from the defensive work, they brought that attacking work as well, from set pieces as well, was of course great to see. So once again, Scott Dan here, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our back 4, and that is the left back Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now obviously before I go on to talk about Joe Ward's performance, which I do think, considering he was playing out of position, and you know, I've given him a 7, it really goes to show how well he sort of adapted to that role. Before I go on to talk about that, I might as well talk about the fact that he was playing out of position. And I suppose before the game, obviously most of us were saying, even though Van Aanholt hasn't necessarily been great in recent weeks, we obviously expected him to start the game. So it was a little bit of a surprise, and I suppose from Roy Hodgson's perspective, a very bold decision to actually drop Patrick Van Aanholt. But actually in the end it seemed to be the right decision, because actually Joe Ward brought us something that we've been missing from Van Aanholt recently, in the fact that someone who just done really solid defensively, particularly against the threat that Arsenal posed, but also someone who actually done pretty good going forward as well. And you know, Joe Ward isn't necessarily got a lot of quality going forward, as we've seen in previous seasons when he's played at right back. You know, yes, he might be good defensively, but sometimes he's a little bit limited going forward. But actually, if you look at the average position in the game, he was actually playing further forward than Wan-Bissaka. So actually just showing that, even though he's still playing out of position, he's still trying to venture forward and of course give his all to the team. And I suppose, looking at it now, you're thinking, does Joe Ward start at left back for the rest of the season? Because for me, you know, if Van Aanholt isn't playing well and Jeffrey Slupp's injured, you know, who else is going to play there? You know, we've got someone like Martin Kelly or Joe Ward. So I do think, you know, if Roy Hodgson wants to stick with this bold decision, then he can do. And I think, you know, the fact that Van Aanholt hasn't necessarily been that great recently, and the fact that he struggled, the fact that Joe Ward's come in straight away, and not only just come into the team, but come into the team against the quality of the opposition we did, really goes to show how good his performance was. And I suppose what he brought to the team was a little bit of defensive stability. So rather than, you know, Van Aanholt, who likes to go forward and likes to go back as well, we had someone who was primarily focused on defending and then eventually getting forward when we were on the break. So we brought that stability in terms of that sort of good mix between attacking and offensive work. And I suppose, even though he's a right back, and yes, he may have played in midfield and played at left back before, but he didn't look out of sorts, which really goes to show once again how well he adapted to that role. Now, of course, moving on just to the performance overall, I do think he was fairly solid in the game, and you know, the goals we conceded weren't really down to him, so you've got to look at him and go, aside from the goals, a very sound defensive performance. And of course, like I've said already, being played out of position, and certainly normally he'd expect people to play on the other side of him, obviously with him playing at right back, so you might expect him to struggle, but he didn't do that, so that was of course great to see. I suppose the only negative of what was a really good performance from him is the fact that he got a yellow card in the 81st minute, and that was just a late challenge on Aubameyang, and essentially it was just because he was too much to handle. So that occasion sort of got the better of him, and of course, you know, fouled Aubameyang. But like I said, the fact that he lasted sort of 81 minutes without even getting a card really goes to show how well he dealt with the threat that of course Arsenal did pose. And of course, you know, if you're looking at the goal to make it 3-2, it was obviously Aubameyang who did run down that flank, Ward's flank, but like I've said already, isn't really mainly down to him, because it was just someone like Martin Kelly as well, who, you know, should have done a little bit better there, and of course Gaeta had no real chance with that goal there. So whilst you could say yes, Aubameyang sort of ran inside from Joe Ward's flank, but I'm mainly putting the blame on Martin Kelly. So I do think overall a fairly solid performance from Joe Ward, playing at left back as opposed to his natural right back role. And like I said already, you know, he performed well, dealt with the threat, and other than getting booked sort of right towards the end of the game, a fairly sound game overall. And like I said, it does beg the question, the fact that he played so well at left back, does he replace Van Aanholt for the rest of the season? You know, we've only got 3 games left now, we're now safe in the league, so do we chance it and see whether we could, you know, get that bit of more competition now at left back, or do we go back to Van Aanholt? Of course, I'll leave that for you guys to obviously discuss in the comment section below. So I'm now going to move on to the first of our players in midfield, and that is Cheikhou Kouyaté, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, of course, Kouyaté is one of these players who, of course, came in last week, obviously, when Jeffrey Slupp got injured. Of course, Kouyaté came on, and he actually had a really great impact against Man City, and rightly so, deserved to start in this game against Arsenal, and certainly made his presence known. Hence why I've given him the 8. Now, the thing I liked about his work in this game here is not only that he done the defensive work, which you would expect him to do. We had to make sure that our midfield was compact to deal with Arsenal, but also going forward, he had to give his contribution as well. So the fact that he mixed these two roles in midfield so well, and as well as he did, was of course nice to see. Now, of course, in terms of the Kolasinac, who of course plays on the left hand side for Arsenal, quite a lot of the time Kouyaté was sort of doubling up on him in terms of his defensive work. And essentially, Kolasinac likes to get down the flanks, likes to put balls into the box. So rather than just relying on someone like Wan-Bissaka to deal with him, obviously Kouyaté came on just in front of the defence and just gave that little bit of extra protection. And, that's something which you normally expect from a defensive midfielder. But the fact that Kolasinac didn't necessarily have that many chances, or that many good chances, goes to show how good Wan-Bissaka did in particular, but also Kouyaté giving that little bit of extra protection goes to show really how actually, if your midfield actually help out defensively, how much of a difference it can make. Now, the other thing I really like, obviously that defensive part of his game in terms of giving cover was great, but the fact that he was willing to sort of punish people like Kolasinac when they try and go too far forward and try and drive forward. The fact that he was willing to use that energy, use that tenacity, use that sort of physicality that he's got in the midfield to try and get the better of them and try and drive forward was of course great to see, because of course Arsenal had about 70% possession, so of course we were going to struggle in midfield. But it was nice to see Kouyaté not only obviously closing people like Kolasinac down, but obviously when he was going too far forward, Kouyaté was right in there trying to punish him, being a little, I suppose, being aggressive in the fact that you're trying to get in there, try and get the better of them. And, even though he's a defensive midfielder, and in this game it was very, very obvious that he was playing very, very deep and sort of to the right-hand side, protecting that left-hand side of Arsenal. Even though that was the case, I do think he had that intent nonetheless to actually make these attacking runs going forward. So that was, of course, nice to see. And, like I've said, he made such an impact against Man City, so he rightly deserved his place in the side here. And this was a performance, once again, where he showed the quality and versatility he's got, because not only was he able to do the defensive work to deal with the threat that Arsenal had, but also in terms of countering the press and the attack, or the attacking quality that Arsenal had, he was able to drive forward as well. So once again, very good performance from Cheikhou Kouyaté, and obviously fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the next player in our midfield, and that is James McArthur, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, I suppose McArthur, in recent weeks he's actually started to pick up his form, and whilst a few people have been calling for him to be dropped, there's been some parts of his game, certainly in terms of sort of the pressing he's done in midfield, which has been quite good, and certainly he sort of carried on that sort of pressing which he done against Man City and done it here against Arsenal, and I do think he done a relatively good job of that. Now, when you're looking at his pressing, looking at it and sort of splitting up and looking, which players in particular he'd done it against, and he was fairly effective at doing it against, was actually Guendouzi and El Neni. So these are two players who, of course, playing in the centre of midfield for Arsenal, and of course Arsenal like to play both out wide and down the middle. So the fact that McArthur was pressing relentlessly, essentially, just pressing up against these guys, limiting these guys' space and time on the ball, was of course good to see. And it was fairly effective, because when you're looking at the Arsenal players, you're looking at their best players were probably, players from out wide and up front. So it just goes to show how well we sort of shut out the midfield, because we were playing quite narrow and defending well against them. It really goes to show how well that we done against them, that actually their two central midfielders weren't really involved in the game as much as, say, their wide players and their front players were. And certainly the fact that McArthur just continuously was just going into them, closing them down, and essentially just limiting their time and space on the ball. And even though Arsenal had 70% possession, when you limit their sort of midfield, or their two midfield players, you limit their chances on the ball. It's of course you're going to make it even more difficult for them in terms of actually breaking you down and getting through the middle. Now, of course, McArthur, had a really good performance first half, but he managed to grab a goal in the second half, and that was, obviously, it was 2-1 at a time. Great ball in by Luka, obviously Scott Dam, lovely powerful header, and of course McArthur was in the right place, reacted quickly, and obviously headed it in to make it from 2-1 to make it 3-1. So, of course, at that point, it would have been nice, rather than just having that sort of narrow 1-goal lead, it was nice for us to obviously double it, and it was nice for McArthur to get it, because our deliveries from set pieces had been good all day, as we saw with the first goal. So it was nice to see yet another set piece delivered in by Luka, powerful header by Dan, and of course McArthur finished it. So once again, not only McArthur in terms of getting another goal, I think it's his third of the season, but also the teamwork in terms of the delivery and the head down as well. They were also as good as the goal. And I suppose 3-1 at that point, I wouldn't say it was game over, because we know that Arsenal could tear us apart. but you know, it helped us to ensure victory, and the fact that we got that 2-goal lead, and it just gave us a little bit more sort of, I suppose it allowed us to play with a little bit more confidence and a little bit more calmer in that respect, and sort of, yeah, having a bit more calm in terms of our play, because we weren't having to worry about just having that very slim lead. And of course it was McArthur, it was all down to him getting that goal, making it 3-1, even though we went on to lose, we obviously didn't go on to lose, but we didn't go on to lose because Arsenal didn't get back into it, and you could say it was all down to us actually getting that advantage, getting it up to 3-1. That sort of helped us to see out the game and obviously help us to not lose it, because I'm sure if it stayed at 2-1 for quite a lot of the game, or even more of the game, then maybe Arsenal could have got it back to 2-2 and maybe got it back to 3-2 themselves. So obviously that goal that McArthur scored, very important in terms of us holding on to the result. And I suppose when you're looking at his performance, obviously without the goal, I probably would have given him a 7 for sort of his industriousness in the midfield, and I think that's the least he deserves, because he put in a very good performance, you know, both defensively and offensively in midfield, you know, and in particular his pressing, like I've already said. So I think the least he deserved was a goal, and of course I do think in terms of his rating, I do think the 7 is a fair result. So a very good, remorseless performance in terms of his pressing, and obviously in terms of the display itself, a very industrious one in terms of his work rate. So once again, Jason McArthur here, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the third player in our midfield, and that is our captain, Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, obviously, this is what someone's used to describe him, and, you know, I sort of want to put it in here because it really does sort of epitomise his performance. And the 3 words are solid, dependable, and unfussy. And I personally think that really sums up his performance there, Luka, because that's exactly what he was. You know, giving that protection to the back 4, much like Kjarte, he was very solid. From set pieces, in terms of that delivery, he was very dependable. You know, his first goal, obviously great ball into Benteke. The third goal we scored, great ball from the corner for Scott Dann to head down to McArthur. And of course, in terms of unfussy, he just went about his job, done what he had to do in the midfield, and you know, that was both defensively and offensively. So them 3 words I really think do sort of really sum up his performance. And you know, credit to the Croydon Advertiser, I think it was them guys put it out there, or whatever they're called these days, South London News, or you know, they put it out there, and I, you know, or Football.London, I tend to agree with them, because you know, I think these 3 words are really good at epitomising him. And of course, if you do want to read, you know, Football.London's match report, of course, feel free to do so. Obviously, where they keep changing the name of the page, it's a bit confusing, but it's Football.London. Now, in terms of Luka's performance, obviously moving away from them 3 words and sort of going into a little bit more detail, he obviously got the assist for Benteke's goal. And of course, I talked about Wan-Bissaka driving forward and then passing the ball to, or offloading the ball to Benteke. He's tried to run through on goal. Arsenal players can't deal with it, pulled his shirt back, set piece, you know, just sort of in between sort of the edge of the penalty area and sort of the centre line, the halfway line. So just sort of in a prime position in terms of just knocking the ball long, and that's exactly what Luka did, because I've criticised him this season for his set piece deliveries, obviously other than penalties, because they've been lacking. So it's nice to see him actually from a dead ball situation, other than the penalty, put in a fantastic delivery right onto the head of Benteke. And of course, the finish from Benteke was even better. So right off, you know, 17 minutes into the game, great delivery, got us 1-0 ahead, and that sort of gave us the advantage in the game. And obviously, you know, going through into half-time, I do think he carried on doing what he had done before the goal, in terms of just being solid in midfield, giving that protection to the back 4, and that was, of course, great to see as well. But then I suppose, you know, you're looking at the 3rd goal as well. Once again, another delivery from set piece, great corner in, down, heads to McArthur, McArthur heads in as well. So you're looking at the 2 main contributions he made in the game, aside from his defensive performance in terms of winning tackles, you know, dominating the play in the centre of the field. Aside from that, it was mainly down to these 2 assists. Obviously, the second one, which is obviously Palace's 3rd goal, that's not really going to count as an assist, but I like to call it a pre-assist, because he was the guy who was the architect of that. So once again, solid performance there from Luka in the fact that he you know, was able to have that contribution from in both his midfield performance, but also from dead ball situations as well. Now, of course, late on into the game, it looked like he sort of picked up a calf injury, but it didn't really matter because he was sort of able to run it off. But nevertheless, obviously, Arsenal fans, with them losing, they sort of got the wrong end of it, thought he was wasting time or whatever, and they were booing him for the rest or the sort of final moments of the game. But nevertheless, had that calf injury, ran it off, and was able to help us see out the game overall. So I do think a 7 for Luka is a fairly a decent result for him, and certainly well deserved. Like I said already, defensively he was very solid. From dead ball situations, he of course was dependable, and in terms of just his overall, you know, midfield performance, it was unfussy, unmessy, done what he had to do, and done it very effectively. So once again, a good performance from the captain, fully deserving of the 7 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our midfield, and that is of course Max Meyer, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, of course, and I talk about this sort of week in, week out now in terms of, you know, which sort of players we should play in midfield, which combination. And of course, we played all 4 players across the midfield because we packed out the midfield in a 4-4-2. And of course, with the injury to Jeffrey Slupp, it obviously meant by default Max Meyer came in. And of course, with us dropping Andros Townsend to play that narrow midfield 4, obviously meant that Chiarte also came in. Now, obviously Max Meyer, I've given him a 6, and it was mainly just because he was one of the more disappointing players. And it wasn't to say he had a bad game, because I think quite a lot of his link-up play with Wilfried Zaha was great in terms of, you know, helping us to drive forward. So actually, some of parts of his game were quite good. It's just the reason I've given him 6 is just compared to the other players like Luca, like Chiarte, where they just seem to up their game and just seem to give their all for the team. It was little spells here and there where Max Meyer looked good. So rather than him looking continuously good and always looking a threat, it was in little spells here and there. And like I've said, it was mainly down to the way he was linking up with Will. And, you know, they seemed to have a good partnership, which of course was nice to see. Now, to be honest, like I've said, you know, I think looking at this game here and the fact that we had to play quite a narrow formation, you'd have to look at it and go, actually, he actually stood out against Arsenal for his defensive work, because even though he claims to like playing in a defensive position or a more defensive position, I personally, when I've seen him play, think he looks better in a more advanced position. So he was playing in a position which he much preferred, and I think he did really stand out because he'd done his bit defensively and certainly was, yeah, certainly done his bit to help us in the midfield. And even though we only had, you know, 30% possession, I do think, you know, some of the tackles or some of the blocks or even just the pressing here and there just to restrict Arsenal or to slow them down or to break up their play was of course great to see. And I suppose, you know, when we signed him in the summer, you're looking at him going, we'd expect him to be that playmaker, and that's exactly what we would have expected. But this game here against Arsenal, it was nice to see the other side of his game. And whilst it's not necessarily as nice to watch in terms of he's not, you know, being that playmaker, putting balls in behind, looking to shoot, you know, at least he's actually doing the other side of his game, which is actually playing deep, you know, picking up the ball from deep, you know, defending when he has to do. And that's something that I was really impressed with his performance. But like I've said, I've given him a 6 as opposed to a 7, which of course I've given to the rest of the midfielders. And that's just down to the fact that it was spells here and there where he looked good. Now, obviously, I've seen a few people say he was quite clever and quite composed in the way he played, and you know, I certainly have to agree with that, because, you know, even though he's more sort of a more playmaker in my eyes, when he was playing deep, he was quite clever with it in terms of how he was dealing with the ball, and obviously quite composed as well, because when you only have 30% possession, you've got to make sure you do stuff with it and make sure, you know, you don't just give the ball away quite freely to the opposition. So the fact that he was quite composed with that pressure from Arsenal, with that quality, was something once again that did impress me. And I suppose, you know, you're looking at how sort of he played against Arsenal's midfielders, and I suppose you could say he undermined them in the fact that, you know, he'd normally play a little bit more offensive, but actually he played slightly more defensive. Maybe that threw them off, I don't know, but just having that little extra man in midfield, just because we were playing so narrow, just really frustrated Arsenal, and certainly we've done a good job of it. And certainly Max Meyer was one of these players who, because of his clever play, because of how composed he was, sort of really undermined his opponents in the midfield, especially sort of people like El Neni and El Neni and etc. You know, these are players who, you know, they really struggled in midfield, and it was mainly down to people, you know, who like Meyer, like McArthur, and, you know, I think it's Guendouzi as well. So Guendouzi and El Neni, you know, they really sort of were undermined in the midfield just because of sort of the calm sort of play that Meyer has. But once again, fully deserving of the 6 I've given him. Not as good as the other players in midfield, but certainly not a bad performance nonetheless. And like I've said, you know, it would have been nice to see him play in a more advanced role, but like I've said, you know, the fact that we had to deal with that threat that Arsenal had, I do think, given the circumstances, it was better to play him in that sort of more sort of conservative position, playing a little bit deeper. But nevertheless, good performance from him and fully deserving of the 6 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the front 2, and I'm going to start with Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, obviously, the phrase I'm going to use is the game changer, because that's exactly what Zaha was, because this was a performance, you know, given all the speculation about him wanting Champions League football, which I don't blame him, because if I was a footballer, I would love to play in the Champions League. But with all this speculation going on about, you know, all different clubs linked with him, players, clubs, you know, wanting to bid sort of 60 million for him. With all of this going on, the fact that he was focused on Palace and performed as well as he did really reflects in the fact that I've given him an 8. Now, of course, the reason I say he was a game changer is obviously because of his overall play, the fact that he was unplayable at times. Even though we were playing with sort of essentially 9 men behind the ball, that one man would be Wilfried Zaha playing slightly further forward, and we'd just literally pump the ball to him, and he was able to actually get the ball out of our half on his own. So things like that, in terms of being unplayable, carrying the ball forward when there's no support, as well as just his overall attacking play in terms of just absolutely frightening defenders, especially centre-backs and in Mustafi in particular, just running at them, creating trouble for them. Everything about his game was really great to see. Now, of course, the main thing for me that was the game changer is the fact that we obviously went 1-0 up straight after half. Went 1-0 up, went into half-time 1-0 up, come out in the second half, and within 2 minutes we've conceded. So of course the pressure's now on us because Arsenal have got the ascendancy, they've scored an early goal. So it was really important that we actually got back into it, and that's exactly what Zaha did. You know, he responded to that equaliser, put us back in front, and it was a great goal. You know, obviously the flick on by Benteke into Zaha's path was obviously great to see in terms of that link-up play which we saw a few seasons ago, but also the pressure that Zaha was putting on Mustafi to actually cause him to make a mistake, and then the composure which followed that to actually, you know, get it under Leno and put it into the goal, and of course go off and celebrate in front of the Palace fans was of course sort of made it even better, because whilst people are going to talk about Mustafi and the fact that it was his defensive mistake, you've also got to look at the other side of it and go, actually Zaha done a really great job in terms of chasing that flick on by Benteke, closing him down, running on the outside of Mustafi, out-muscling him and putting it beyond Leno, because people are really going to be only sort of concentrating on the fact that it was Mustafi's mistake, but then on the other hand I think it was sort of sheer brilliance from Zaha to actually get us back into the game to make it 2-1. Now, I suppose the final point really, because there's so much to talk about his performance because it was just so good, and I think we could argue it was probably his best game of the season in terms of just his overall attacking play and the fact that it was so difficult for Arsenal, especially their defenders, to deal with him. And I think it's just that when we needed him the most, you know, in terms of when it was 1-1 to get us back into the game, when we were sort of, you know, when we had sort of our limited amount of possession, when we were looking to get the ball forward and drive forward, or when we were looking to create chances, he was the guy that actually came through when we actually needed him. So the fact that he had a really good game offensively, running at the fullbacks, putting balls into the box, that obviously side of his game was great to see. But the fact that he popped up with the goal when it was needed, the fact that he was in the second half in particular, he was always looking to dribble forward, always looking to get forward, was of course good to see as well. And, you know, I suppose the word to use is unplayable, because that's exactly what it was. And, you know, people have been questioning his price value. That game alone really goes to show how much he really should be worth, because the quality on show there was obviously phenomenal. And I suppose there's one real chance and one really want to talk about. Obviously it was Benteke's offside goal, because the amount of chances we had in that first half, we could have been 3-0 up at half time. But one in particular, lovely run, put the ball into Benteke. Yes, it was offside, but nevertheless it was nice to see him create a chance once again, showing that partnership that him and Benteke have up top. But once again, a fantastic performance from Zaha. Obviously, hopefully, even though he wants to go Champions League football, and I would let him leave, you know, in terms of helping him achieve his potential and actually play on a platform which will allow him to show his skills. But then on the other hand, I wish we can keep him, because games like this are ones to really cherish because of the quality he showed. So once again, fantastic performance from Wilfried Zaha, and fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So I'm now going to move on to the final player in our starting 11, and that is Christian Benteke, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, I suppose the main 2 stats you want to talk about, obviously in terms of Benteke's performance, his obviously first goal in a long time, but obviously a goal nonetheless, and also an assist in the game here. So not only obviously did he get back on the score sheet, but also he was looking to create for his teammates as well. So the fact that he had 2 goal contributions on what was a very good overall team performance really goes to show the quality he obviously had in this game here. Now obviously we know the trouble he's had scoring this season and previous seasons, and whether that was down to him playing with his knee injury, or whether it's just the lack of confidence or lack of form, or the formation not working, whatever it was, obviously I think it was 358 days he hadn't scored in. So it was nice to see him actually finally get back onto the score sheet. And yes, there was a little bit of help from people like Jenkinson. I think it was a Mustafi for actually playing him on side, but nevertheless it was nice to see him get back onto the score sheet. Of course, the delivery from Luka obviously all came from Benteke being fouled. He obviously got back up, went into a central position, and was able to head it home, which was a really vintage sort of Benteke header, and that's what we saw sort of the 16-17 season. that was sort of a reminiscent of that in terms of Benteke's goal he scored. But once again, it was so nice to actually see him score a goal, not only because it's been such a long time and it was his 200th Premier League appearance, but also it was nice to see it in the fact that he's had his injuries, he's found it quite tough, and it was nice to see him actually come back now. He's had his operation on his knee. It's like he's playing with a new knee. And I suppose also you've got to look at the last few weeks or so, and we've been calling for him to start. The last 2 games he's started and he's been really effective, and he's finally got a reward for his good performances overall in midfield. Now, like I said already, in terms of the goal he got, it was a very he deserved it in terms of his robust play. In terms of getting in between the defenders. Sort of essentially playing the offside, or they were playing the offside trap, but obviously he was kept on the side. And like I've said already, a vintage Benteke header to obviously make it 1-0. Obviously, going into the second half, he was involved in that the second goal we scored. Obviously, nice flick on, or the ball's into him, nice flick on into Zaha. And like I said already, Zaha run onto it, out-muscled Mustafi. And yes, most of it was all down to Arsenal's failings at the back, the fact that they were quite lackadaisical, and the fact that Mustafi just got so easily turned by Zaha. But nevertheless, the fact that Benteke was able to win that aerial duel, nod the ball into the path of Zaha, and he was able to finish off, is what made it even better. So the fact that Benteke's overall performance in terms of coming quite deep and doing his defensive work, but also being that outlet, holding the ball up, being that focal point to the team, drifting out wide when he has to, like when he won the free kick. Little things like this really was great about his overall performance. But the fact that he capped it off with not only a goal, but also the assist to add on to that as well. So 2 goal contributions in a free goal game for Palace. Palace scoring 3 goals was of course great to see again. And like I've said already, we're obviously quite debating, what to do with him. Should Batshuayi start? Should Benteke start? The fact that he's now got the goal to sort of show for his good performances. Hopefully that can carry on. We've got 3 games left of the season, and let's just hope he's got his new knee, new sort of lease of life in him, and obviously he can carry on, the last few games of the season, and maybe get on the score sheet a few more times, because certainly the troubles he's been through with injuries this season, it was nice to see him score against Arsenal at the weekend, but it would be nice to see him get a few more goals before the end of the season. So once again, Christian Benteke here, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So I'm now going to move briefly on to the 2 substitutions Palace made in the game. Obviously, Jordan Ayew coming on for Benteke in the 78th minute, and of course Andros Townsend coming on for Maya in the 80th minute. So obviously 2 changes quite close to each other, and that was sort of because of how well we were playing and how well we were restricting Arsenal. Obviously quite a few players got quite tired, so of course Benteke came on, brought Jordan Ayew on, a little bit more energy, a little bit more pace up top, and of course Maya a bit tired as well. And also because we were sort of changing the formation out a bit, obviously Townsend went into his more natural position. Obviously Maya was playing wide, even though he's not a wide player, so of course bringing on someone like Townsend just to see the game out was of course good to see. I'm going to give both of these players 5s, not because they necessarily had bad performances, just the fact that the time they were on the field was really quite limited and didn't really have enough time to make an impact. But of course, like I've said, with Jordan Ayew in particular, just came on to sort of add fresh legs to the side. And when obviously we were 3-1 up in particular, Arsenal were putting immense pressure on us, so it was really key that we were able to deal with that heavy pressure, and certainly we did do that. And even when it was 3-2 as well, where the pressure was even higher, people like Ayew just came on just to sort of help us deal with that pressure. And yes, he didn't sort of have the chance to make much of a contribution because there weren't many balls that were coming into him or many chances that were coming into him. But nevertheless, having a player like that who can just bring on the off the bench just to see out the game, give a bit more energy, was of course great to see. And much the same with Townsend, only on sort of 10 minutes or so plus injury time, and he was sort of given little chance to show his quality going forward because we were obviously trying to contain Arsenal and keep it at 3-2. And even though Townsend, we know the quality he's got going forward, he's also got quality in terms of coming back and defending deep, and that's exactly what he's done in the game here. So both substitutes didn't necessarily have that much time to make an impact, or didn't have the chance to give that much contribution to the game. But I still think in terms of bits we saw here and there, and the sort of impact they made, or the positive impact in terms of helping us see the game out, was of course great to see. So once again, a 5 for both of the substitutes. Now obviously moving on to a brief summary of the game, and I've seen a lot of people say this, or say some of the things I'm going to sort of mention, and that's essentially, I really want to sort of epitomise and sort of sum up what everyone's feeling at the minute. And I suppose the first thing really is that we're now mathematically safe, and this is going to be next season a 7th successive season in the Premier League, which of course we're just adding on to the record now. Obviously I think it was 5 or 6 was the record, so now we're just getting beyond that, which of course is great for the club. in terms of, you know, that sort of period we've had in the Premier League. But, you know, I think it was a great way to secure safety. You know, it's always nice, you know, maybe in last few seasons or so, last few games, we've actually managed to win and, you know, secure our survival. So it was nice to see us do it, you know, a few games earlier, so we can actually relax on the last few games and 3 games in the season. But also it's nice to see us do it against Arsenal as well, because there's nothing better than winning, but it's even better when you beat one of the top teams. So that's what made it even better. And, you know, the fact that we hadn't won against Arsenal since sort of the 90s, it was nice to see us actually finally beat them away from home. In the league. And, you know, I suppose you're looking at this performance as a whole, without going into too much detail, it was exactly like the one at the Etihad against Man City back in December. A proper away performance, everyone in the team doing their bit to contribute, and of course, you know, in terms of the qualities of the goals, you know, the set piece deliveries, just the quality of Zaha to run on and, you know, get in behind Mustafi, that really sort of epitomised, you know, how good we've been away from home this season. But also it's got to be up there with the one at the Etihad in terms of playing against a quality opposition, and we just defend well, hit them on the counter-attack and you know, attack really well. And I suppose moving on to the attacking side of our game, once again, great to see Benteke back amongst the goals. Like I've said already, had a hard time with injuries and not scoring. Nice to see him back on the score sheet. And I suppose, you know, obviously Zaha scored, but aside from scoring, the fact that he had another performance where he showed what he does best, you know, in terms of just showing that real effort he's got, in terms of, you know, the quality he's got at running at defenders, you know, causing havoc for them. That was, of course, great to see. Now, I suppose, obviously, aside from the result we got, you know, another thing you've really got to consider is that, obviously, we won the game against Arsenal. That was, of course, great to see. But, obviously, I made the comparison to the game against Manchester City back in December. And, you know, we had our first choice back four, essentially, in that game here. So, the fact that we were able to get such a good result with, obviously, our third and fourth choice centre-back pairing, obviously, with our centre-back choices, you know, Dan and Kelly, the fact that they really sort of put in a shift and made up for the fact that we lost both Saka and Tompkins to injury, really epitomises, you know, how good the performance was. And I suppose it really epitomises sort of that team spirit in the side, in the fact that even with our two, you know, main players, you know, actually having injuries, we were still able to actually go forth without our first choice centre-back pairing and actually still get a result. Because yes, the City result was great and the goals we scored were even better, but we done that with our first choice centre-back. So the fact that we were once again up against a quality opposition, but we're still able to get a result with our sort of second choice, well, I suppose second or third choice centre-back pairing, and our third and fourth centre-back centre-backs was, of course, great to see. And I suppose, obviously, the defence, in terms of not having our mainstay defenders, was, of course, something which it was nice to see actually people step up. But also the fact that we had a goalkeeper who we relied on for the most part in Gaeta, made loads of fantastic saves to keep us in it, really was it goes a long way to show how good the performance was. Because, you know, yes, it was good, the defensive work, and, you know, certainly the midfield as well, giving protection to the back four, but also the contribution from Gaeta in goal was also really good as well. And, you know, it was nice to see we actually can now have someone we can rely on. You know, the defence can do their work, and when called upon, you know, the goalkeeper can also do the work really well as well. Now, looking at the game in a little bit more detail, you know, you've got to look at the tactics and go, actually, Roy Hodgson was spot on, and he deserves credit, because before the game, people were going, what's he doing? You know, we're playing 4-4-2, and, you know, we were playing Ward at left back as opposed to right back, where his main position is. So, of course, there was a few questions before the game, but essentially Roy Hodgson got it spot on, because Patrick Van Aanholt hasn't been playing well, played Joe Ward there, done a fantastic job. You know, played with a 4-4-2, but quite a narrow four in midfield, done a great job in terms of restricting Arsenal from playing down the middle. So little tactics and things like that overall, as well as actually playing Zaha, playing off Benteke, and having that partnership up top, was also a really good thing we saw from Roy. So whilst people were criticising him, you've got to look at it and go, we've secured Premier League safety, and it was all down to obviously getting a good result against a top team, but also Roy Hodgson actually on the day getting the tactics spot on. And, you know, yes, the tactics from him were also very good, but actually the players' execution of it was obviously even better. They clearly done everything he asked of them, and, you know, it obviously seemed to work really well in our favour. And I suppose, you know, you've got to look at the result and go, we've got to raise a glass to it, and that's something I've seen people say on Twitter, because, you know, we've been waiting for this result in terms of a win against Arsenal away from home since 1994. So the fact that we've now got it after all these years, and, you know, we've had good successes against Arsenal recently, but the fact that we've now got one away from home, and obviously first at the Emirates and first since 1994, was of course great to see. So not only was it a great result against a top team who of course is battling for the top 4, but it was also a great result in the fact that we finally sort of broken that duck of not beating Arsenal away from home since 1994. So hopefully in the seasons that will come, obviously touch wood, seasons beyond next season, hopefully we will still have the chance being in the Premier League, play against Arsenal. Hopefully we can have we don't have to wait as long to get a win against Arsenal once again. And I suppose the final real thing for me is that we're now safe, which of course is great. And the only way is up now, because we're only a few points off the teams above us. 1 point off West Ham, few points off Watford and Leicester and etc. who are above us. So really now we've got to be looking up rather than down. And for me, final thing really of this section is up the Palace. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award, but before I do that and give you my Man of the Match and who I thought the biggest influence on the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. And when you consider, obviously across the field, it was a very good performance from Palace, obviously not just defensively but offensively as well. Of course us getting the 3 goals. It was obviously quite difficult to pick out 4 players, because I do think overall as a team performance it was obviously very good. And you're looking at different parts of our play, different aspects of our game, and you could pick out players from all across the field for their contribution. Defensively in terms of limiting Arsenal and aside from the goals, just defending really solidly against them for the majority of the game. Going forward in terms of how good we were on the counter-attack given our limited possession. So there's all different parts of our game and all different players and different aspects of their performances, which of course I could give them a little bit more credit for. But the 4 players I've gone with are a real reflection of our overall performance, and you probably could have guessed, looking at my player ratings, the players I'm going to put forward. But I've gone with Christian Benteke in goal, the right back Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Cheikhou Kouyaté in midfield, and of course Wilfried Zaha playing up top. And of course I do think that gives us a real balance between the team performance in terms of different parts of the field. And in terms of Christian Benteke, once again made fantastic saves late on in the game. Obviously one from Lacazette, one from Iwobi, and them 2 in particular kept us in the game, kept it as 3-2. But aside from these massive important saves he made in the game, the fact that he looked so comfortable for the rest of the game, making saves, making catches, coming to claim balls, that was of course great to see as well. And on the subject of his saves, the fact that he showed the agility he had, the fact that he had the reflex time to actually get down to the ground, and the fact that towards the end of the game, rather than just giving the ball away, pumping it long, giving away possession, he was determined to waste time. Obviously not to the extent where he'd get booked, but he was being very careful, time management, controlling the game, and that helped us to see the game out. So in terms of Gaeta, the saves he made, especially the one from Lacazette, the fact that he showed really great reflexes and reactions and things like that throughout the whole game, and then the fact that you also sort of run the clock down, let's say, towards the end of the game. Now obviously Wan-Bissaka here, like he always does, a classic Wan-Bissaka performance, holding his own down that right hand side, limiting Arsenal's attacks. And Kolasinac in particular was a player who did seem to struggle, just because Wan-Bissaka was defending so well against him. And I suppose for me the main reason why he done so well is that just Wan-Bissaka just settled into the game so well. Had a little bit of an early blip, but after that picked himself up, settled into the rhythm, was able to deal with Arsenal and occasionally also go forward as well. So the fact that Wan-Bissaka done so good and so excellently defensively is why I've put him forward. Obviously Cheikhou Kouyaté here playing in midfield, I've put him down for both his defensive and offensive work. Obviously his defensive work in terms of doubling up and giving that extra protection or extra layer of protection in front of the back 4, and in particular for his work where he was helping Wan-Bissaka on that right hand side, that was something that really did impress me. So the fact that someone like Kolasinac in particular was a player who struggled because of he had both Wan-Bissaka and Kouyaté marking him, really goes to show how well Kouyaté was. So the fact that he used his energy, he used his tenacity to obviously do his defensive work really well was great, but offensively as well, in terms of always looking to get forward, had that sort of attacking intent, or had that sort of aggressive feel to himself in the fact that he was always looking to drive forward and make these runs going forward. So obviously Kouyaté here for both his defensive and offensive work, and of course Wilfried Zaha. What else can I say? Obviously he got the goal in the game to make it 2-1 to Palace, but the fact that he was just so unplayable at times, the fact that whenever he ran at the centre backs, especially Mustafi, they looked frightened. He was just running at them, using his pace, using his skill. And when you consider we had 9 men behind the ball at one point, Zaha was the only guy up, and yet he still carried the ball from our own half into Arsenal's half, and still almost created a chance off it. So that sheer quality on the ball, creating chances, running with the ball, everything about his game was really impressive, and certainly got to be up there for the award. Now, And like I said already, there were many players I could have put on this shortlist, and arguably there is a reason probably for each player in the side why I could justify putting them in here. But for me, there's only one clear winner, and that is Wilfried Zaha. And the reason he gets it above any other player is just for the sheer fact of that word unplayable, because that's exactly what he was. Arsenal really struggled up against him, and when you consider, well, in my eyes, this was one of Zaha's, if not Zaha's, best performance of the season. Really goes length to show, how well he's had played. But you've got to look at people like Benteke. He obviously won the club's official one, but arguably you could put him forward for the award. Someone like McArthur in the midfield as well. Someone like Scott Dan in defence. Players like here who obviously miss out on a nomination, but certainly do deserve to get credit as well. But like I've said, this week's man of the match for the game against Arsenal is of course Wilfried Zaha. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Christian Benteke and James McArthur following the game.
Just how big a result is that for Crystal Palace?
It's massive. I can barely even speak because we had to put a shift in, and obviously we're happy to get the win.
Christian, what did it take to win here? Arsenal had won their last 10 in the Premier League at home.
We knew that it was going to be difficult. It's never easy to come here and get some points. And I think this afternoon we did a great job all together, and we worked really hard for each other. And I think we got what we came for.
You got the first goal. You said it would be perfect to score on your 200th Premier League appearance. What does that goal do for you in terms of your confidence? It's the first time you've scored this season.
It's been a really tough season, like I said, and everything that happened, it happened for a reason. So I just kept working hard, trust myself, and don't find some excuse. Just work hard, and the only truth is on the pitch. And today was a good day for me and the team, and I'm happy.
Wilf, when Arsenal got back in it at the start of the second half, were you concerned at all?
Yeah, because they're a good team. Obviously, they started to, push on after the first goal, but I just thought we just need to dig in, carry on doing what we're doing, and obviously we got the result we wanted.
Did you always sense that you would get the chances?
Yeah, we did, because obviously we just had to. Our game plan was to just stay compact and try and break, and obviously there was a lot of space because they're pushing forward, so there was a few gaps for us to put the ball in behind, really.
Look, over the last day or so, Crystal Palace fans will have read some quotes from you about your ambition and where you want to be. Is there anything you can say to them about your future and where you want to go?
To be honest, the only thing I'm thinking about is Palace. I'm at Palace right now. I'm a Palace player. I don't know what my future holds for me, but I'm here at Palace working for Palace. So that's all on my mind. I'm not distracted by anything else.
And in terms of now finishing the season, how much confidence do you take from that victory?
It's massive. Obviously, it's hard to come here and get points, let alone win the game. So going into our last 3 games is going to be a huge positive for us. So yeah, we're happy going into our next games.
42 points. Christian, where should Palace be finishing this season?
I don't know. We're gonna just take game by game. There are 3 more games to play, so we're just gonna keep going and without looking at the ranking.
Christian, a goal and 3 points today, so it's the perfect away day.
Yeah, it's a great afternoon for us, and we came here with the ambition to win, and that's what we've done, and we can be pleased.
The manager praised the performance of yourself and Wilfried in particular. That must make you really happy.
Yeah, I was happy to play alongside Wilf. We know that Wilf is capable to pass 2-3 men, and he knows also my strength. So it's a good partnership, and I'm really pleased for him also that he got back on the score sheet.
And we're mathematically safe now, but obviously yourself just getting back into the team, you want to try and win as many more games now, surely.
Yeah, because I didn't play for a long time, so I don't really look. I don't really look the table. I will say, it's more about just take game by game and just try to enjoy as much as I can.
This is the first time we've won away at Arsenal since 1994. So it's a tough place to come and play football, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why we can really be happy, because we know that we played against a strong side this afternoon, and we knew that was going to be hard, but we just believe in ourselves, and then we just stick together. And I think today was a great afternoon for every player, every Palace fan as well.
James, what an away win!
Unbelievable. Very, very hard place to come to, and what a performance.
I don't think they've lost in 10 league home games. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive that we've come here and turned them over like that.
Yeah, we've always found it hard here. Last year, we came into the game and thought that we had a very good chance, and they blew us away in 15-20 minutes. And today we knew that the start was very important, and we got a good start, so that stand as good stead for the full match.
And you got yourself a goal. You must have seen it quite late, though. It was good reactions.
Yeah, Danzy's done great for it. Something that I feel that I've not done as well as I should have this year with the goals, and thankfully get one today.
And Roy singled out Wilf and Christian. It's great to have Christian back and playing like that, isn't it?
Brilliant. Not only on the ball, off the ball, they were tremendous. They made it so hard for them, and it gave us a great shape all the way through the team to counter off.
And I think that's our first win here since 1994, well, away at Arsenal. So on behalf of all Palace fans, thanks very much for that.
Yeah, they were great today. We have been very good away from home, and some amazing results, and that's definitely up there this year.
Fantastic win. You must be over the moon.
Yeah, really delighted with it. I thought it was the players did ever so well tactically. I thought both individually as a team, we worked so very, very hard to make certain that we were compact and narrow, and made it difficult for Arsenal to cut their way through us, something which we know they're very good at doing. But on the counter-attack, or when we actually got hold of the ball and started passing the ball, I thought that we used the space in front of us very well. The two front players had an excellent game. Both Christian and Wilf were really first class today, not just in their attacking play, but also in their defending play. They helped the team out by dropping in and sealing off, if you like, part of that deeper part of the Arsenal midfield, which enabled us to get the screens on we wanted for their front players and to help our back four. So all in all, it was just one of those performances where you really can't fault it, and I thought we were really good value for our victory.
And I guess you couldn't be hard to single out any one player, wouldn't it, really, from a team performance like that?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that Wilf and Christian will get a lot of praise today, and I think they deserve it. And they don't want to be singled out, and they realise that they were doing a job for the team. But it was very important. If you're playing 4-4-2, which is quite a bold system, not many teams come here and do that. Most tend to spread five out across the midfield and make life difficult for them. We played a sort of a classic 4-4-2 formation with those two, and they did such a good job that if they're going to get a little bit of extra praise themselves, they truly deserve it. And for someone like Christian, who's really had 2 seasons since I've been at the club, largely disturbed by injuries. He's been injured, he's come back, and it hasn't gone well for him, and he's been injured again. It's nice now that he's had a run at least of 2 or 3 games. This was the second one I think he started, but before that he came on a sub in 2 or 3 games and did well. So he's really finding his feet and playing, I suppose, like Christian Benteke should play, because that's the player he is. And his work in tandem with Wilf today, I thought, was truly praiseworthy.
And we're mathematically safe now, but obviously we want to keep getting as many points as possible.
Well, I suppose we do, absolutely. But as far as I'm concerned, the players have done a remarkable job keeping us in the league again. We've lost 3 very, very important players, 3 important, chess pieces, if you like, in getting us as far as we got in Mamadou Sakho, Tompkins and Schlupp. And the people who've come in, they haven't had a lot of game time, so it's been tough for them. The players have done so well that, as far as I'm concerned, nothing can happen in these last 3 games that will disturb my opinion of them and how well they've done. But if the sort of fire and determination and guts they showed today to see that game through and come away with the 3 victories shows me that they've got that in them. And as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing to stop them in these last 3 games really pushing themselves up the table, and I hope they do. But I must repeat, I'm satisfied. I've got to say, it's been a very good season.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Christian Benteke and James McArthur had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Arsenal. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Everton. So thanks for listening and remember to up the Palace.